Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. In this video we're going to keep looking at the Zendikar decks and we're going to move on and look at the Adventurers, which is a red-green deck which is all about allies. So, allies are pretty synonymous with Zendikar. We've had them in 2 out of the 3 sets on Zendikar. I would argue that Party in Zendikar Rising is kind of like the spiritual successor of allies, and honestly I think allies done better, honestly. But yeah, so the whole theme behind allies is they are meant to represent kind of like a archetypal like adventuring party, like you'd have in like you'd have in D&D. You'd have a group of adventurers who'd all go out on quests and find treasure, and they'd all support one another. They'd all help each other out with their own abilities. And I think the original intent was for them to have like adventurer as a creature type, but they just couldn't like fit it into the type line. I think because because obviously they have their normal species class, and then you have to have a like ally as well in there as well. So I think adventurer was too much for the type line. So this is like the first incarnation of them, where they all basically have comes into play abilities or or abilities that trigger when another ally comes in, and it can get pretty out of control pretty fast. I speak from bitter experience because there was someone in our playgroup who really liked allies. I think he built 3 ally decks of different color combinations. So yeah, we were used to seeing them quite a lot, and they all basically play the same. They all have effects that scale up very quickly. Each color obviously has its own slight different flavor on them, but they all essentially play the same. You just want to play a bunch of allies, get a bunch of ability triggers, and just kind of overwhelm opponents that way. So the foil face rare of the deck is Turn Timber Ranger. So 3 and 2 green for an Elf Scout ally. It's a 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you create a 2/2 green wolf creature token and put a +1/+1 counter on Turn Timber Ranger. So you play this, and it's immediately 5 power on the board for 5 mana. Which is pretty good. And it just means every ally you play is then also just creating an extra creature. It's creating a wolf token and also making the Turn Timber Ranger stronger. This is like one of the more expensive allies, so I don't know. It kind of tops off the curve, so I don't really know how many more allies you'd play after this. But I think it's pretty good. There is combo potential with itself. I think there's a blue enchantment, Xenograft or something like that, which is in Mirrodin, where you can like change creature types and stuff. So if you can change Wolf to ally, it just combos with itself infinitely, which is pretty fun. But yeah, pretty good rare to include, I think. So the other rare is the red rare ally, which is Kazal Warlord. So 4 and a red for a 3/3. When it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you can put a +1/+1 counter on every ally you control. So yep, this gets pretty crazy. So it's coming in as a 4/4, and buffing up all your other allies. The majority of the creatures in the deck are allies. So yeah, this gets pretty crazy again. Every ally you play is permanently empowering all the others. So yeah, pretty good rare, pretty good combo of rares here. Honestly, I think for the adventurers. And then we have 2 Oran Reef Survivalist, 1 in a green for a 1/1. When it comes into when it enters the battlefield, or another ally enters the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So it's coming in as a 2/2. And yeah, every time you play an ally, it gets a +1/+1 counter. They all pretty much follow this same sort of templating. When it or another ally enters the battlefield, something happens. And at certain rarities, they start caring about the number of allies you have already. So Highland Berserker, 1 and red for a 2/1. When it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, all your allies get first strike until end of turn, which combined with how big they're potentially going to get is pretty scary. So yeah, they don't all give +1/+1 counters. Some of them give out just keywords until end of turn. Two Tuk Tuk Grunts, 4 and a red for a 2/2 with haste. When it or another ally enters the battlefield under control, it gets +1/+1 counter. So it's coming in as a 3/3 haste for 5, which is okay, especially at common, I think. And yeah, again, it's obviously just getting +1/+1 counters from other things. So I think the more interesting allies are the uncommon ones. So Marasa Pyromancer, so 4 and 2 red for a 3/2, which is pretty expensive, but when it or another ally enters the battlefield under your control, you can have it deal damage to target creature equal to the number of allies you control. So at the very minimum, this comes in as the 3/2, and it does 1 damage to a creature. But it's likely not going to be doing 1 damage. It's going to be doing maybe 3 or 4. And, you know, again, this every time you play an ally, this ability is triggering and you're damaging a creature. So it can, again, like, it's super expensive at 6 mana, but like, I'm glad it is, because this would be really hard to deal with if it came down earlier, I think. But yeah, pretty good ability, and I do think the uncommon ones are a bit more interesting, ones that are doing something beyond just keywords or +1/+1 counters. A single Joraga Bard, so 3 in a green for a 1/4. When it or another ally enters the battlefield under control, your allies get vigilance until end of turn. Yep, so at most you're giving them vigilance first strike. They're getting +1/+1 counters. Yeah, it's getting pretty silly. You know how much they can buff each other up. So yeah, just one of them. And then a single Tajuru Archer, 2 in a green for a 1/2. It really annoys me it doesn't have reach, that it's an archer without reach or first strike, but it's fine, because whenever it or another ally enters the battlefield under control, you can have it deal damage to target creature flying equal to the number of allies you control. So it's basically half the Pyromancer. It can only damage flying creatures, which is fine. That feels archery enough, I suppose. But I'm kind of surprised there wasn't a green one that gave trample that I can't think off the top of my head. Like, it's weird that the green one is giving vigilance. I mean, we're at the point where vigilance is starting to bleed into green's part of the color buy, so it's fine. But I would have expected trample rather than vigilance, and like a white one give vigilance instead. But yeah, whatever, it's fine. And then a single Stonework Puma, so 3 mana for a 2/2. It has no abilities. It is here just to give ally triggers because it's an ally itself. So yeah, this is kind of it's kind of a boring utility creature, but it's kind of welcome, I guess. Kind of wish there'd been more than one in here, honestly, just so it could do that. And then that was honestly pretty much all the ally creatures in red and green that are in Zendikar. So we had to fill the space somehow. So single green Weaver Druid. So 2 in a green for a 1/1, taps to give you double green. This is fine, helps get the more expensive allies down quicker. Awakener Druid, 2 in a green for a 1/1, makes a forest into a 4/5 green tree folk creature as long as it's on the battlefield, which is alright, I suppose. Yeah. And then a single Borderland Ranger, 2 in a green for a 2/2. When it ends the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, put it into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library. Yep, again, that's perfectly fine. You know, always good to get some land searching, land ramping in some way. And then non-creature spells, we have a single Beast Hunt. I do not think this is very good, personally. I look forward to someone in the comments, you know, prove me wrong. But I think so. It's 4 mana. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, and you put all creature cards revealed this way into your hand, and the rest into your graveyard. And I just don't think that effect works too well in this deck, honestly. Because you know there is the potential you pay 4 mana and you just mill yourself for 3, which can be helpful in the right deck, but it's not this deck. I just feel like 4 mana is like so expensive for this effect. I feel like this should only be like maybe 2, you know, like 1 and a green maybe. Yeah, because 3 cards is not a lot to dig down. Yeah, you could say it's potentially, yeah, you say, oh, I'm potentially drawing 3 cards. Yeah, that's the dream situation, but like, I don't know, you could just play Harmonize, which is the same mana cost. It's still 4 mana, and it just draws you 3 anyway, you know, without having to do all this. So yeah, I don't like Beast Hunt. I suppose it's common, maybe, so that's something it has in its favour, but yeah, I don't think it's very good. 2 giant growth, yep, classic giant growth, good in here, because obviously you want to be doing a lot of swinging into combat, so pump spells always welcome. Overrun, I guess this makes up for a a green ally that doesn't give trample until end of turn. Overrun is just always super good, especially in a deck like this when you're kind of trying to get as many creatures down as possible. Yeah, Overrun is always a very big swingy move to make. Single act of treason. Again, this effect is always okay. Gets like a troublesome blocker out of the way, I suppose, and then you can swing with it. Sure. Fireball, just normal kind of X spell, and then 2 lightning bolts, which is very welcome to see because lightning bolt is obviously a very good burn spell, and yeah, just fine to have in here. And then the mana base got just a Terramorphic Expanse, and then 9 Forest 8 Mountains. Yeah, perfectly fine, perfectly fine. So it could have been. So there's no red or green cards here because it's using all the red and green allies that were printed in Zendikar. So I really think this could have been an opportunity. I know we're coming off an Alara where we just had 3 color decks, but this seems like such a good opportunity to have made this deck 3 color. Just to splash white or blue in it because those are the other 2 like pretty good ally colors. White, I would say especially. Blue is okay, and then black is. I think the worst ally color. But yeah, if we had white in here, you could have had Kazandu Blade Master, which is like an excellent. This always gives me vibes of like Final Fantasy, like the art on Kazandu Blade Master, just something very. I know Final Fantasy about it. Maybe because it's just like a guy with goggles on it. Maybe reminds me of Sid actually from FF7. Maybe that's why. But yeah, Kazandu Blade Master, 2 white mana for a 1/1 with first strike and vigilance, and it has the usual when it or another ally enters the battlefield, it gets a +1/+1 counter. So at the very least, this is a 2 mana for a 2/2 with first strike and vigilance, which is very very good. And it's going to just keep getting bigger. And then, potential alternate rares if you splashed in white or blue. Kabira Evangel, which has the ally trigger to give everything protection from a color of your choice until end of turn, which is super strong. Or Seagate Lore Master, which lets you draw a card for every ally you control. So it's actually one of the rare ones that doesn't have the enter the battlefield effect. It's like an activated ability that cares about how many allies you have. So I think that might be the only one. I could be wrong. At least in this set. I think in World Wake, there's a few more allies that do it a bit differently. But yeah, this is the only ally deck we get all in all of Zendikar block, which seems insane to me because it was like they were bigged up as like such a such a gimmick of the set that like, oh yeah, allies, they're in every color. And they have like these big effects which people really like. And yeah, well, this is it. This is the only deck that has allies in them, and I mean I will talk about that again at a later date and a kind of like what could have been and what should have been. But yeah, overall I think this one's like pretty solid. It's red green aggro, so it's not really anything we haven't seen before, but it's got like this fun like tribal aspect to it. Yeah, and I think all the cards obviously synergize very well with each other because that's the whole point of allies. There is something very sort of slivery to them, I suppose, that they all benefit. Every ally benefits another ally. So yeah, I think this is like perfectly fine. Honestly, it's a lot better than Pumped Up, and I think it's a lot better than the Core Armory one. So this is kind of like the top half of the Zendikar intro packs. But what did you think after seeing it? Any thoughts, opinions, stories about this deck, or allies in general from Zendikar? Please put a comment below. Always like reading those. But I'll be back next time. I'm going to look at the last Zendikar intro pack. But until then, thanks for watching and listening. Have a great day.